Ask for a blessing for a safe trip home, and in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I will entertain motions for the position of Chairman to the Board of Supervisors for this year. I'll be taking any motions.
I nominate Mr. Ross.
Are there any other nominations? Having none, this will be a roll call vote, so Mr. Cole will, or the clerk will read out the names and just say aye as she calls your name.
Mr. Skinner?
Aye.
Ms. Heidig?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
I'm abstaining.
Mr. Trampy?
Aye.
Mr. Sabula?
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Aye.
Mr. Yakubowski?
Aye.
Mr. Ross, congratulations. You are now chair.
Thank you.
Be careful what you wish.
I'll now take nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Mr. McLaughlin.
Any more nominations? Call for a vote.
Mr. Skinner?
Aye.
Ms. Heidig?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. Trampy?
Aye.
Mr. Sabula?
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin? Mr. Yakubowski?
Aye. Okay. My understanding is we have a seat change to do right now.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, at this time, it's under our bylaws, the senior member of the board, which would be Mr. Skinner, has a preference.
My preference is to stay right where I am at, sir.
Well, I think we've already arranged where other members are going to sit, so let's move right now.
If everybody would move to their allocated seat, and then we will make the name changes here and also correct it on the voting machine.
Okay, Mr. Barnes, the next item on the agenda is the adoption of the bylaws and code of ethics.
Correct. Are we ready on the voting machine? Okay, so we can do electronic voting on this at this point.
Are there does anybody have anything for discussion? Dr. Trampy has moved to adopt. Any further discussion? Call to vote.
Seven yes.
Okay, and I understand that there are two items to be pulled from the consent agenda.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, my understanding is I want to pull item 13, and I believe also the minutes would be pulled, and we can vote on others unless the board members have other items they'd like to pull. Oh, I'm sorry, that's right, we do need to vote on the calendar. Excuse me, I did forget that. We need to vote on adopting of the calendar. The only change that we did is because of Veterans Day fell. We moved that particular date to a Thursday. Other than that, the dates remain the same. So we can have a motion to adopt a calendar for the year.
So moved.
Okay. Call the question.
Seven yes.
Mr. Chairman, to get back to the consent agenda, we'd like to pull the minutes and then also item 13.
Are there any other items to be pulled from the consent agenda? All right, and I'll take a motion to vote on approving the consent agenda with the exception of 13 and the meeting minutes.
So moved.
Okay, call the question.
Seven yes.
In dealing with the minutes, I know we have two new board members, by the way. Welcome, Mr. Sabula and Mr. Yakubowski. And I know y'all did not participate in the last board meeting. At this time, you may want to abstain from voting on these particular minutes.
Move to approve the minutes.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, let's vote.
Five yes with Mr. Yakubowski and Sabula abstaining.
Mr. Chairman, on item 13, we requested support PRTC for an application grant for the county sheriff for additional VRE rail cards. We've received some additional information today, and it doesn't appear they're going to be able to apply for that grant, so I would ask that we just remove it and not take any action at all on it at this time.
Okay, without further discussion, does anybody have an objection to removing this from the consent agenda? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, the next item on our agenda is a transportation work session. I'd also like to point out that part of VDOT's report usually comes later on, but since I've got Mr. Nelson here and he'll be a part of this presentation, he'll also be doing his VDOT report, which will clear up some of the things as we go through this transportation work session. Also, this is there's a lot of information to digest here, but this is a very important work session. We have allowed, we hope, adequate time and for the board's involvement. And having said that, I'll invite staff, VDOT staff, as well as county staff up front, and we'll start the work session.
Good evening, members of the board. Just wanted to go ahead and give you your transportation briefing for the month. First, I will go over some preliminary engineering projects that we've got going on in the county. The Gordon Road Park and Ride expansion is scheduled for advertisement in May of 2014. The Route 1620 Harrison Road intersection improvement project right-of-way phase was scheduled for partial acquisitions in January of 2014. The add date is in 2016. Route 1606 improvements at Mud Tavern, the project was advertised on December 17th of last month. The Route 628-208 intersection improvements project, there was a public hearing held last week at Cortland Elementary School. The project is scheduled to be advertised in spring of 2015. The Route 620-639 signal modification project, the public hearing for that project was also held last week at Salem Church Library, and the project is scheduled for construction advertisement in August of 2014. The work at the Convenience Center on Harrison Road, we've had a pre-construction meeting for the installation of the signal. Foundation designs are underway, and we anticipate the groundwork and electrical services to be installed and completed by the end of the month, with that project potentially being completed this spring. Now to go into some of the concerns from the last board meeting. Mr. McLaughlin, I believe that you had a request to review the left turn lane just west of Gordon Road as you approach Harrison Road with some of the striping and identifying that the turn lane essentially turns from a through lane to a turn lane. I talked to our folks at our regional traffic engineers, and we plan to update the pavement markings this summer to delineate that turn lane. There was also a request to review the recent resurfacing within Chancellor Hill and Enchanted Woods subdivision. I saw the pictures, we've gone up, we've looked at it. The fact is that during the operation of the slurry seal, there was no patching done prior to. So any distresses that were there before we placed the slurry seal have already come back. So I've gotten with our maintenance forces. We're looking to do some patching in there this spring to alleviate those concerns. There was a request to review drainage along the corner of Brock Road and Orange Plank Road during the recent rains. We went out there and we unstopped. There was a DI that was trapped with leaves and it was preventing the water from flowing through there. We're also scheduled to do some ditching work out there to help open up some of those tail ditches to help water run away from the roadway. That's scheduled for next week. There was a request to review the misspelling of a Chancellorsville sign on Route 3. We found the sign. We're working with the Park Service to actually have the sign replaced, as it's one of their signs. Mr. Ross, there was a request to provide you information for signal timings and synchronization along the Route 3 corridor. I believe that information was provided to you in late November. There was also a request for regional traffic data, and that was also provided to you in late November. Mr. Skinner, there was a request to have a meeting with the CSX rep at the Mine Road crossing. We had that meeting on January 2nd. I've been in contact with the individual that we met out there, Mr. Brooks. He's supposed to be providing me with an estimate for potentially having a concrete crossing there at that location.
Let's talk about that just for 1 second, please, because, I discussed this also with the county administrator, and is it my understanding that if we don't go a concrete, that when they do the third rail, they're going to redo that in asphalt?
Yes.
Okay. And so, did we ever find out, too, by the way, the time of Lansdowne Road crossing when it was done?
No, I've not heard that back from
Well,
Mr.
let's
Brooks.
check into it, because I'm telling you, I checked with county here, and we did that when I was on this board.
Okay.
Okay, so I know it's been within the last 6 years, going on 7.
Okay.
Okay, so a couple questions I have for you. Yeah, I was surprised coming out 208. The speed limit has changed from 55 to 50. I knew nothing of that, to be honest. I don't know if anybody else did on here. But what was the purpose for changing it down to 50 instead of 55?
As a part of the project, we did a traffic study out there to determine what would be the appropriate safe speeds throughout that corridor, and that study did indicate that we should drop the speed limit down to 50 miles an hour.
Is that because of the construction that's been there for the last?
Well, it was a
10
combination of the construction and we were potentially looking at raising the speed limit and lowering the speed limit in certain sections. And when we did the overall review of the entire corridor through there, it was found that we needed to drop the speed limit in that one section.
Okay. I had a couple constituents call me and want to know, when you redid the surface at South Point, basically all the way from 126, I think all the way through to, was it 17, when you resurfaced
Yes.
the Route 1?
Uh-huh.
Is there something different about this asphalt? Because what happens is when it rains out there and it's wet and at night, you cannot see anything because of the reflections off of the lights, basically, when you look down there. The lights, and I went out and checked it out during the rain, and even during the daytime when you have a stoplight and you've got a green or red light out there, it really does make it shine right off the surface up into your eyes. It's very difficult to see the lanes, to be honest with you on that. And so I didn't know if it was a different type of asphalt, is a chemical you're using in it, but I guess somebody told me there's the same gentleman that talked to me about this, there's a gravel or something they use in other ones, I'll get the exact term of them later for you, that really takes all that light from the road off of it.
Well, I know we've had problems in the past with maybe some of the asphalt material building up on the top and causing reflective issues and giving off a sheen that would cause a glare issue. But the asphalt that was used on Route 1 is a conventional dense graded mix, and we generally don't have those issues. But
I then will ask you to join me on some rainy day in the evening and
Okay.
take a ride with me, and I'll show you exactly what we're talking about to do that. The other thing is the slurry seal that you were talking about. You and I have talked about this before, and it seems that this is the way that VDOT can afford to redo some of these roads in our areas. And so I'm going to ask you if I can get together with you and possibly meet with some of the members of HOAs and stuff like that, what you're going to do, especially in the Lees Hill community there. They're very interested in that, and I couldn't completely explain it myself.
I would be glad to.
So if you could, you and I can get together and make a date on that. So
All right.
I'd appreciate it very much.
All right, I guess the only other item that we had on here was there was a request for an update for guardrail on Lansdowne, and that was installed the week of December 10th.
And let me thank you very much for that. I think, Chris, that's part of your section too down at South Park. We've been working on that for probably 5 to 6 years, believe it or not. And we got the one section done on the northern side of the South Park, I guess it is, or South Point. Anyway, the other side, it's tremendous, and I appreciate that because that is quite a drop off into that creek there. And that creek also has those block barriers stepped down from the water. So, you know, it's a tremendous improvement. It's a safety for our citizens. And again, give your crew thanks. They did a wonderful job, and even though there was a little while there where they held traffic up one day, and I'm sure you heard about that, they did a wonderful job, and thank them for me.
No, I will.
Thank you.
Ms. Heidick, I guess we had a request to look into the installation of the school bus stop ahead on Ridge Road. I went out and looked at that school bus stop ahead, and it is in the direction of which the blind curve is.
Okay.
So, I mean, we feel that.
I don't know what the citizen was saying. I'll double check with him unless he meant some other.
Okay.
I'll check unless he meant some other spot, but that's the spot I thought it should be in too, so.
Okay. We also had a request to review Monrovia Road for the installation of farm vehicle signs. We will be placing those signs. I should have a sketch sometime next week to have them installed.
Thank you.
No problem. There was also a request, I believe, that came in for a maintenance concern on Brock Road. We have gone out and looked at that. There's a drainage concern. We're trying to schedule that work within the next few weeks to repair the drainage.
Okay. Yeah, at the Brock and Gordon,
Yes.
I believe it was.
Mr. Trampy, there was a request to review the workmanship of the recent resurfacing in Fox Meadow subdivision. You and I met out there on the 10th with some citizens. I think we've kind of addressed the questions that they've had, and we're going to continue to monitor that over the spring to have some permanent repairs put in there also. There was also a request to review the Hollybrook and Cobblestone neighborhoods for resurfacing needs. Both of those neighborhoods are currently on our 2014 resurfacing schedules.
Thank you.
No problem. And that concludes my update. Does anyone else have any additional questions or concerns?
Yeah, Mr. Sabula?
Yes, sir. First off, I'd like to congratulate you guys on the quick reaction on the local flooding conditions we've had on the road surfaces with the placement of safety signs.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd like to call your attention in particular to the section of Marie Road from Arcadia Road out to, say, Saddlebrook. There are several areas there that I think the ditching alongside the road would clear up those problems, because there's two areas in particular that are chronic even with a light rain. So you might want to take a look at that.
Will do, Mr. Sewell.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair? Mr. McLaughlin?
Two questions. And this may be something that we can answer later, but I'll just give you on Old Plank Road and Chancellor Road, at the intersection. It's a T intersection. It's kind of a bad intersection. So there's generally a lot of waiting cars turning onto Old Plank from Chancellor, and it's just not a good intersection. So has anything ever been looked at or planned for that intersection? That's just, I don't know if you know that right now, I'm just setting you up there. And the second one, if you go down a mile, Old Plank and Carthapen, it's kind of a strange intersection as well. It's kind of a Y, or I don't know how you describe it. But again, there's driveways that come out right in the intersection. Some of these, it's an issue. And I guess, have we ever looked at those two intersections for improvements? So.
Okay, I can look into that.
Are there any other members? Mr. Yakubowski?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few items. Number one, in Breezewood subdivision, there's a court, Hammond Lane, I do believe. I don't know because the sign's not up, but they need a sign. And apparently they've asked for a long time, and nothing's ever been put up as a street sign at the intersection with Breezewood Drive and Hammond Lane.
Okay.
If you can check that out, I'd appreciate it. Paving schedule for Stony Creek Drive. One of the issues that was raised was that, is there any way, and obviously don't need to answer right this second, but perhaps in the future, when that gets resurfaced, can we pave into the shoulder? You have townhouse community, you have apartments, all the way up to the shopping centers. I'm talking about from probably Ingleside Drive up, and just pave the shoulder and make it a walking path, because it's very dangerous for people, especially, and there's no driveway cut-ins, by the way. This is all, it backs up to all yards. The only thing you got is a couple mailboxes that we'd have to deal with. So if we can at least put down the radar and deal with that. And
Yeah, we generally don't do anything like that on our resurfacing schedule as far as widening for accommodations for special use paths or anything of that nature. It would have to generally be a separate project.
okay, well, can you figure that, and we can discuss that?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to get that on there. A three-way stop on Stratford and Madeline Avenue. That's off of Lafayette. Several residents over there are concerned about cars that speed through and make that turn and just keep on going. Then also on Three Cedars Lane, Lovels Road, and Pleasance Drive, they don't all line up. So it's a pretty bad turn coming out of Three Cedars, and then you have Pleasance that's trying to turn, people coming from Lovels both ways also. And then is there an update on the light for Virginia Heritage on Spotsylvania Parkway, the Balls Bluff Road?
If I could speak to that.
Yes, sir.
Currently, we had met with the developer. They are issuing a letter of credit. My understanding, I also met with the homeowners HOA association. Under the timetable, they are doing they hope to have the preliminary draft of the design by the end of this month, which will go to VDOT for review, and then they'll respond back. My answer to the homeowners association that by the end of the year we should have the light up, but it's got to go through a process of the design's got to be approved by VDOT. They've got to order the material and then do the construction. But we are on target for getting it, and the developer will be putting it in at his expense.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any other members that have any questions for VDOT? I just have one, and that is, out of all our major arteries, say Route 3, Route 17, Route 1, Levels, Harrison, Salem Church Road, and Courthouse Road, are there any that aren't presently synced, that the light pattern is not synced up?
I would have to go back and get that.
Because sometimes, especially on 208 coming out here, I'm hitting almost every red light. So, but maybe it's part of the plan. But if they're not, I think we should look at it.
Okay.
So if you could come back at the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and I think with that, we'll close out and we'll start our working session.
Can I have the floor computer, please? Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. The panel here before you, for those of you that don't know everybody, we have Bonnie Jewell, who's the Senior Financial Analyst with the county, Mr. Wayne Brooks, who's Division Director of Capital Construction, Mr. Sean Nelson, who's Fredericksburg District Residency Administrator for VDOT, and Mr. Jason Robinson, the Program Director for Programming and Investment Management for VDOT. This work session was put together as a joint effort between VDOT and the county to provide you a broad overview of the transportation projects that we have both completed since 2005 when a bond referendum was issued, as well as upcoming projects and active projects. We're not looking for any action from the board this afternoon. Our plan is to come back to the board in the future to get guidance on prioritization of these transportation projects, as well as you go through the budget process, to get guidance on potential funding for the project. So a short agenda for today's meeting. Sean has been through his VDOT monthly report. Wayne will talk briefly just about the completed road projects since the issuance of the $144 million bond referendum in 2005. I'd like to point out that those projects that are going to be shown on the screen are not all bond funded. So there was a mix of funding. They're not all funded by the bond referendum. And then we'll go through some active and potential road projects. Mr. Brooks will do that. And then Mr. Robinson will talk about VDOT's 6-year improvement program and some funding sources. And then we'll turn it back over to Mr. Nelson, who's going to talk about some proposed I-95 improvements at exit 126 and at exit 118. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Ed. This map that you see now, it's a map showing completed road projects since 2005 bond referendum. If you look at the symbols on the map, the green symbols are those projects that were managed by VDOT. The gold are the ones that were managed by the county, and the blue were developer-driven. If you look at those symbols, they have numbers in those symbols that correspond to information that was included in your packet, which gives a detailed description of those particular road projects. Here's a list of some of the completed projects, some of the major projects in the county that were bond projects. Again, the list continues. If you notice that Road 3 was on that project list. Here's some additional ones, some major projects that carry some turning movements. Again, this list, those projects that were completed. Okay. Here are some unpaved road projects that were completed. These were designated as poor, so they were on the priority list to do first. This map indicates the active and potential road projects. Again, those symbols in green indicate the VDOT projects, the gold, the county managed projects. The active road projects that we're currently working on that are in various stages of design or construction. The Chancellor Convenience Center entrance, this is underway at this time. Massaponax Church Road, the design is 100% on that. Cherry Road extension, we're currently working on a right-of-way. VRE, which we'll have separate slides on these as we go through them. And we just discussed the Balls Bluff. VDOT road projects that are current, Sean went over those in his report, most of them. And the fair unpaved road projects, we will be getting into those. Again, these indicate VDOT projects, the two major ones at the top. Sean will go into more detail later on in the discussion. Again, this list of fair unpaved road projects that we will be coming back to the board for prioritization of those projects. This slide is on the Chancellor Convenience Center improvements that we're currently have underway. This is in conjunction with the VDOT traffic signal that's being installed in its approximate location. Okay. Massaponax Church Road, we're 100% complete on that design, and we'll be looking to get prices on that job in the next few months. Okay. Cherry Road extension, this was a work order added to the Road 3 project. We're currently working on the right-of-way. Appraisals of the properties that we need to acquire are underway. The VRE station, the commuter parking lot. The description is 1,500 space commuter lot. It involves the station itself to be completed by VRE, third rail. This also includes turning lanes on Route 17 with a traffic signal. It's fully funded. Courthouse streetscape, we're at 90% plan design at this time. The Balls Bluff traffic signal, Mr. Barnes just discussed that briefly. Harrison Road and Route 1 intersection, the VDOT project that Sean went over and doing his report. Smith Station Courthouse Road, this is another VDOT project that's currently under design, and they're moving towards the right-of-way phase next month. Route 1 and 606, again, this is a VDOT project. It was advertised last month for bids. Lane Corner is another VDOT project. It's fully funded, and that is under preliminary design at this time. The active road projects that are a combination county VDOT, proposed rural additions at Holly Drive and Mount Holly Lane. These are roads that have never been in the state secondary road system, and we're working with the property owners to get dedications so VDOT will accept the road and they will rebuild it to their standards. It's no cost as far as the right-of-way, but we are acquiring it. The property owners have to dedicate it. We have about 50% of the property owners signed up for each one of those roads.
Is there some reason it's taking so long, or? Because I get calls on Mount Holly about every few weeks.
It's just the process of getting all the property owners to sign, and some of them have liens against the properties, and we have to go back to those mortgage companies and get them to sign off as well. It does take time.
But it's moving along.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Are there any questions on any of those projects as we move forward? If not, then I'll let Mr. Robinson go ahead and talk to you a little bit about the six-year improvement program and some information on funding for sources.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for having us today. As Ed said, my name is Jason Robinson. I'm the District Program Director for the Fredericksburg District of VDOT. My group is tasked with the development and management of the six-year improvement program, better known as the SYIP, and including various special funding programs that supplement funding to existing projects. We work closely with and also assist the residency administrator in his role as the local transportation liaison to the county, especially on program or policy-related issues, MPO-related issues, and locally administered projects. I quickly just wanted to acknowledge the hard work that both county staff and VDOT staff have done in a short amount of time to prepare for today, and I look forward to continue to working with y'all to take care of some of these issues. The first slide we have here, we can leave it here for just a second. As it pertains to today's discussion, I wanted to provide a brief 5 to 10 minute overview of the six-year improvement program, better known as the SYIP, focusing on a high-level summary of its key inputs, and then a few program parts that supplement its development, such as the secondary six-year plan, MPO-funded projects, and then finish with a brief discussion of the VDOT revenue sharing program. I do wish to point out that this presentation in no way includes every type of funding program that VDOT manages, but rather limits its scope to those items that we feel most relate to the potential projects we are here to talk about. Following my part, Mr. Sean Nelson will then lead into the next part of the presentation, as Mr. Petrovich mentioned. The SYIP is a document that outlines planned spending for transportation projects proposed for construction development over the next 6 years. It is updated annually and is the means by which the Commonwealth Transportation Board meets its statutory obligation under the Code of Virginia to allocate funds to projects. The first year of the SYIP contains all current year funds plus any previous fiscal years that have accumulated on projects from previous versions of the SYIP. VDOT, along with other transportation agencies, works with all stakeholders internally and externally, and provides a draft recommendation to the CTB by the end of each fiscal year for adoption starting the subsequent fiscal year. Updates to current year and planned year allocations are affected by various factors such as revised revenue forecast, revised statewide and local priorities, updates to schedules and estimates, and results of various studies. Good. The development of the SYIP hinges on several various inputs for both initial inclusion and modification. Annually, VDOT holds 2 major public hearings, once in the fall and once in the spring, to receive public feedback on the projects included in the 6-year plan and potential projects for funding. The results of these hearings are submitted to our central office for further funding consideration. Throughout the year, we also work with various elected officials, both at the state and local level, to focus on our highest priorities for each geographic region of the district. Also filtering into the SYIP are the finalized priorities from each county's secondary 6-year plans, projects prioritized throughout the statewide metropolitan planning organization areas and planning district commission regions, urban priorities, and the results of various planning, safety, or statewide studies, as well as projects awarded funding through special funding programs such as transportation alternatives or revenue sharing. And now I'll briefly discuss a few of these inputs in further detail. Typically each spring, VDOT district staff, particularly the residency administrator with program support from my group, the Programming and Investment Management section, coordinate with each county to prioritize secondary roadway projects including paved, unpaved, and bridge priorities for development of the SSYP. The results of this coordination are presented for public input at an annual SSYP hearing for each county, typically taking place in the April-May timeframe. At these public hearings, the board can choose to adopt the SSYP as presented or make modifications as a result of public feedback. Distribution of SSYP funding is made up of a few various sources. In the most recent years, you will notice that most secondary system allocations have been limited to telecommunication fees for each county, as well as a very small amount of unpaved roads funds. Starting in fiscal year 2017, we are seeing the return of the secondary formula distribution as a result of the recent legislation. We will be coordinating with county staff beginning in February to solicit feedback on upcoming SSYP development for the county's adoption in the April-May timeframe. Currently, Spotsylvania County is one of 3 localities making up the Fredericksburg Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, or FAMPO. FAMPO provides a regional focus to transportation planning. In addition to various ongoing planning mechanisms, is tasked with maintaining several planning documents that outline regional priorities, including the Transportation Improvement Program, which is required to include all federally eligible projects within those 3 counties, as well as the Constrained Long-Range Plan, which outlines a constrained vision for funding projects through currently 2040. There are 2 types of federal funding which FAMPO is responsible for overseeing the distribution of: Regional Service Transportation Plan and Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality, better known as RSTP funding and CMAQ funding. For any project to be eligible to receive these 2 types of fundings, it is the responsibility of each locality making up the MPO to submit candidate projects with applications and documentation for consideration to MPO staff annually, typically in the November-December timeframe. However, out-of-cycle requests to evaluate projects for these types of funding can be and have been made previously. Accepting out-of-cycle requests is solely up to the discretion of the Policy Board of FAMPO. VDOT's role is merely to serve in an advisory capacity and coordinate with MPO staff to provide our recommendations regarding cost, scope, and schedule. Currently, FAMPO prioritizes projects for RSTP and CMAQ funding according to the project categories such as intersection improvements, bridges, capacity improvements, studies, etc. Currently, all RSTP and CMAQ funding is programmed to current projects through 2019. New projects would be eligible for funding starting in FY 2020 unless, once deemed eligible for RSTP and CMAQ funding, the FAMPO Policy Board were to vote to prioritize a new project above existing projects. Each spring, FAMPO and VDOT district staff work together to update the prioritization of the project list based on updates to costs and schedules and provide a set of draft recommendations to the FAMPO Policy Board. These are based on updated federal revenue forecasts for both RSTP and CMAQ funding, and I must stress that this reprioritization is merely a recommendation, but final say is with the FAMPO Policy Board onto the priorities for these funding, as well as inclusion in the 6-year plan. Switching modes a little bit from federal to state. The Revenue Sharing Program is one of several special state-funded programs that serve to supplement project development statewide. Funding is allocated annually by the CTB for use by locality to improve the highway systems within each jurisdiction. It is a 50-50 split of local and state funds. Currently, the maximum amount of state funds each locality can request is $10 million per year. So if theoretically a jurisdiction were to put in $10 million of local government funds, it would be matched with $10 million of state funds, ultimately resulting in $20 million each fiscal year for projects. Eligible projects include construction, reconstruction, capacity or roadway flow improvements, bridge, and maintenance projects. Currently, under the CTB approved revenue sharing guidelines, applications are evaluated on the basis of 3 priorities for funding. The total funding for this program is determined by the CTB each fiscal year, with the maximum statewide allocation being $200 million and the minimum being $15 million. The past 2 fiscal years have seen statewide allocations just above $150 million for the entire state, with priority going to Category 1 projects. Now we'll talk about the 3 categories. The three categories or priorities of project applications are as follows. Priority 1 applications include those projects in which the award of revenue sharing funds would allow for the construction of a project included in the 6-year plan or in an approved locality plan such as a comprehensive or capital improvements plan to begin sooner than it would have if it did not receive the funding. Priority 2 applications include those projects for maintenance efforts on deficient pavement roadways or bridge rehab based on approved rating systems. Priority 3 applications are for construction and maintenance projects that do not meet the criteria for priorities 1 and 2. Determination of what constitutes each priority is first made at the VDOT district level and is then evaluated and confirmed by central office staff in our local assistance division. And as mentioned previously, each locality may request up to $10 million in matching funds per fiscal year, with $5 million of that request being eligible to go towards maintenance priorities. To summarize the revenue sharing process, I just wanted to briefly go over what a typical timeline looks like each year. In the July-August timeframe, or the beginning of the fiscal year, the director for our local assistance division will send out information pertaining to the program and invite localities to submit allocations for the subsequent fiscal year. In the August-September timeframe, county and VDOT district staff should coordinate on the submission of applications with focus on verifying project information such as cost, schedule, and scope. For our district, we have asked that localities submit applications to our office no later than October 1st so that we may evaluate them at the district level and ensure that each project submitted qualifies for the highest funding priority possible. This gives us approximately 1 month to re-verify information and make sure that both sides are in concurrence with proposed cost and schedule. By November 1st, finalized applications are submitted to the VDOT Local Assistance Division in our central office, and initial central office evaluation begins. By December 1st, all supporting documentation and any resolution from boards of supervisors are due to our central office. At this point, each application goes through an official evaluation process by our Local Assistance Division, and by the spring of the following calendar year, tentative funding recommendations are made. These recommendations are then presented to the CTB for final allocation of funding to each project, and the funding becomes available July 1st. It is extremely important to take this almost year-long process into account when formulating any proposed schedules for updating approved county comprehensive or capital improvements plans. At this time, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Sean Nelson, and I would ask if you had any questions pertaining to the items I discussed, we can discuss those after his part.
Okay. I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to come here, and I guess I'm tasked with the task of being the visionary. We've got 2 potential projects along the I-95 corridor that we want to discuss today, one being at exit 126 and the other being at exit 118 at Thornburg. I just want you to know that these are conceptual plans that we've got here, and we just want to have a healthy discussion on potential ways of phasing it, having the board potentially get behind these projects, and potential ways of funding them in the future also. So, go ahead. First project I wanted to talk about is exit 126, and a concept that we've looked at here at VDOT with a super ramp. I'm aware that FAMPO has done a Jackson Gateway study, and some of our improvements that we're suggesting also incorporate some of the improvements that that report has recommended, but we have taken a little bit of different approach to this. For the likely features of our project, we plan to extend the southbound I-95 ramps northward, more than likely to about the location of the courthouse bridge, the bridge over 208 over 95. We'd like to construct a direct connection to South Point Parkway off of the ramp there. We'd then look at constructing a super ramp, which would essentially take the I-95 off-ramp over South Point Parkway, over Route 1, and tie directly into southbound 17. That would allow all the traffic that's getting off of 95, instead of getting on Route 1 to go to 17, would allow a direct access point to 17 southbound. With these features, we would have to replace the bridge over I-95, and we would look at 4-laning Route 17 from Hospital Boulevard back to the I-95 bridge. We'd also like to look at providing access directly to 95 from northbound 17. Now I'll go over some of the brief portions that I just discussed. Here on this overview, you can see where we're extending the ramps northward back to the 208 bridge. You can also see along that ramp improvements, we're proposing a direct access point to South Point Parkway. So if you're getting off on 95 southbound and you wanted to go back towards 208, or you wanted to go to the Lowe's or the Walmart, you could directly get off the ramp on the South Point Parkway. Also, you can see there's extra added capacity on the ramp also. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, I can do this. Here you can see, as a part of our proposal, we've got it phased out, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Here we're also looking at providing additional left turn lanes onto Route 1 off of this ramp, which would essentially improve the ramp as it is existing right now to get onto Route 1. Here you can see the super ramp continues to go behind the service station, behind the Chick-fil-A and the Wendy's, across South Point Parkway, and across Route 1, and ties directly back into 17, where we're proposing to put a brand new bridge. You can also see that off of this proposed super ramp that we would have a direct access point to get back onto Route 1 going southbound. So if you get off of 95 and you don't necessarily want to go to the KFC or go Route 1 north, you could take the ramp all the way down and get off to go towards Cosner Corner and continue south. Here you can also see where we've got the improvements here on this sketch depicting the 4-laning of 17 from the bridge going back to the Hospital Boulevard. And also here you can see where we've got a ramp that ties directly into 95 northbound off of 17, which will be detailed in a slide, the next slide. Here you can see if you're traveling 17 northbound, instead of having to go all the way to Route 1 and sit through the traffic light to go 95 northbound, you could essentially slip off of this lane, off of this ramp, to get onto a CD road that we're proposing that would run from approximately back here all the way to the existing 126 ramp now. So there's two modes that you could do. If you're trying to go Route 1 and you want to avoid South Point Parkway, you could essentially, if you're coming from 17, you could essentially get off on this ramp, ride the CD road all the way back to Route 1 also. Here you can see the CD road is continuing to go all the way through and ties back into the existing 126 exit ramp. Also, as a part of these improvements, we're looking at 4-laning Route 17 from Hospital Boulevard all the way back to Route 2. This would provide additional access to, improved access to the VRE station. It would allow vehicles to have another alternate to bypass congestion on I-95. And the right-of-way, currently we already have existing 200-foot right-of-way, and we would look at utilizing the right-of-way as it is right now to construct a 4-lane roadway through there. What I've done is, I guess I see you all are passing around the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet that you're passing around right now is pretty much goes over the phases that we would look at with estimated cost, total estimates, the possible funding types, and potential ways to look at utilizing revenue sharing and private funding also. As you can see, we broke this out into 6 phases, and we've got 1 phase broken out to 2, so it could potentially be a total of phase 1 and 1A could potentially be done together. We're looking at phase 1, which would be the widening of the exit at 126 southbound and extending it further north, would be approximately $8 to $10 million. We're looking at funding, potential funding sources being the 6-year improvement plan, private funding sources, and potentially revenue sharing. When I say potentially revenue sharing, anything where you see potentially revenue sharing, it means that you generally cannot do revenue sharing on the interstate. There may be portions of the project which would be available for revenue sharing, but the rule of thumb is we do not allow revenue sharing on the interstate projects. The phase 2 of the project would be the bridge replacement over 95, which is an estimated cost of $11 to $14 million. The potential funding sources for that would be the 6-year improvement plan and revenue sharing. Phase 3 would be the widening of Route 17 from Hospital Boulevard back to the bridge that we have replaced. The estimate for this would be approximately $4 to $5 million, and this would also be able to accept funding from the 6-year improvement plan and revenue sharing. Phase 4 would be the big one. That would be the super ramp. That would actually cost approximately between $45 and $58 million. That project would be eligible for funding under the 6-year improvement plan and revenue sharing. Phase 5, we would look at the additional access to I-95 from, or the modification of access to I-95 from Route 17 northbound. That project would cost approximately $20 to $25 million, and the potential funding source for that, since it would be interstate work, would be the 6-year improvement plan. Phase 6 would be the widening of Route 17 from Hospital Boulevard all the way back through the intersection of Route 17 and 2. This project is estimated to cost between $60 and $75 million. It's approximately 5 miles of roadway that could be widened. That project could easily be broken down into smaller projects and done over a longer amount of time. The next project that we were looking at were roadway improvements to Route 606 at exit 118. This is a conceptual plan that we have, and we actually have a draft IMR which is under review right now for this current situation. With this project, one of the key points is the replacement of the bridge. The bridge currently is a deficient bridge, and we have escalated this project and plan to have it advertised potentially in 2015. The additional modification that we're looking at along this 606, which would be on the east side of 95, would be the installation of 2 roundabouts. So if you're coming off of 95 northbound, you would take the ramp, you would go through the roundabout. The access, you would not be able to make a left turn. There will be a median throughout this point to prohibit the left turns to the Dominion Raceway. So let's say if you were getting off the ramp to come to the raceway, you would take the first traffic, the roundabout, you would travel down, go through this roundabout, and turn around to come back to the raceway. During this project also, if it was approved, we would have to relocate Mallard Road. And here you can see a concept of how we would provide access to Mallard Road. So here are some of the features of that project. Of course, the replacement of the bridge over 95 would need to be done. That would be a new 4-lane bridge with a median. We would 4-lane the section of 606, which is east of I-95, and construct the 2 new roundabouts and relocate Mallard Boulevard. There would also be a signal that would be installed at the intersection of the I-95 southbound exit ramp and 606 to control that movement. We would also look at the 4-laning of Route 606 from Route 1 back to the bridge on the west side of I-95. Here's a concept of the widening of the Route 606 portion that would be west of I-95. As you can see, the red line is proposed minimum right-of-way, which is 91 feet. And, well, the minimum is 115 feet in some locations, but the blue would be the property line. So you can see with this project, there would be some impacts to the businesses and the landowners along this corridor. Also along 606, we also have the Mud Tavern project, which is adding additional left turn lanes on the Route 606, which we mentioned was advertised in December. Here's the phasing for that project. It's 3 potential phases. The first phase, which we're looking to move forward with and hopefully have advertised in 2015, is the bridge replacement. The second phase would be the improvements of Route 606 on the east side of I-95, which would be modifications to potentially to the ramps, relocation of Mallard, and the installation of the 2 roundabouts. Phase 3 would be the widening on the west side of I-95, which would be the 4-laning of Route 606 from Route 1 all the way back to the 95 bridge. I'm sure that was a lot. To digest?
Any good questions?
Yes.
Couple, Mr. Chairman, if I could ask some questions, please. Thank you. Just looking at what we've got, the CIP, the 6-year CIP, I understand VDOT put the bridge over 17 back in there. Is that correct? For the 6-year CIP, I thought bridge over 17, over 95. Route 17 over 95 was put back in your 6-year plan.
I think we're trying to get it.
We're currently trying to get it back into the 6-year plan, but right now it is not an active project with funding on it. We have initiated pre-scoping on that project, but it does not have funding over the next 6 years.
Well, we did have that in your 6-year plans a while back, and the money was pulled from that, I believe, probably 4 or 5 years ago.
And I guess I'll just, to brief on that point, as far as the 126 and the phases of that, there are currently 0 projects for improvements at 126 right now.
Correct. I understand that. I need to know that too. But I was looking at something here too. You look at it between 11 and 14 million dollars for that bridge. Yeah, you come down to the 118 exit, and you got only $8 million for that bridge. You know, when I look at that bridge at over 95 at 17, it doesn't look to be any different than the bridge that, although the design is different with roundabouts and everything. What's the difference between, you know, you're looking at $6 million more for a bridge over, a 4-lane bridge that comes over 95 there, than what you've got going over 95 down next at 118?
And a part of that is we're looking at potentially having additional.
I'm sorry, sir, can you, Sean, if you could speak a little closer.
A portion of that too is we're looking at, there may be additional width on that for turn lanes. So the bridge project could be scoped down to have a lower estimate, but as of right now, 11 to 14 million dollars is the range.
So you were saying is that ramp coming northbound off of that bridge, if you're heading westbound on 17 to want to go on 95 north, that's included maybe in that?
No, I'm
Okay,
talking.
so then explain that to me one more time, because I lost you.
There is a potential to have turn lanes on the bridge where it could be a 6-lane bridge, potentially, over 95 at 17.
Okay.
To accommodate for turn lanes.
Turn lanes for what, sir? Do turn lanes to go northbound then on the 95 there?
Michelle, if you could come
Oh,
up.
I understand what you're saying now. You're talking about the trailer park. That's directly over the bridge, that's off to your left side. Yes, on the right side, but it doesn't, okay, understand. So those turns would make the difference in that many. I hope that these estimates you're giving us are hopefully conservative, meaning worst-case scenarios?
Yes.
Okay.
That's why we provided a range.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much on that. I'll ask some other ones later on.
Are there any questions from board members?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Trampy?
I want to address county staff. I was surprised that even under potential projects, even under unfunded ones, there's no widening of Gordon Road. Is that nowhere in our even potential plans?
Dr. Trampy, I'll speak to you a little bit. We were in the process, Gordon Road, because of the cost of it, and I'm doing it just from memory, but it was, I think, in the tune of a $20 million project. We were trying to acquire the right-of-way, and what we had done previously with the board was try to get all the right-of-way acquired first and then come back and look at that project. So currently it's not an active project, but it is a project that was identified in our PPTA in our phase 2 of that. It's just there was no funding allocated for it, but we shoved it way out in the outer years.
Let me say to the Spotsylvania members on FAMPO, I hope that we make that a priority when we ask for projects from FAMPO, because their own modeling shows that when they build the Rappahannock Parkway, it's going to cause Gordon Road to fail. Now, I would like to think that FAMPO would clean up their own mess and in fact make that part of the same project to widen Gordon Road, but I have no confidence, with all due respect to the Spotsylvania members, I have no confidence that FAMPO is going to do that. And I'm happy that the county is taking the initiative at fixing our own transportation problems. I would encourage this board to make an application under the revenue sharing program, because I don't see any help coming from FAMPO or CTB. Maybe when there's turnover on CTB on July 1st, maybe that will change, but I think we as a county need to address our own problems, and I would encourage an application under the revenue sharing program.
Are there any other questions or suggestions or things to
Sure.
look at? No. Yes, Mr. McLaughlin.
So I got a couple for you. And one is, as a member of FAMPO, and I don't like to admit that, but so I got one of the questions I have is, do we have, and I think, you know, in my military background, do we have a strategic plan in the state that laid out all of our critical areas, and we've laid a prioritized list of projects from A to Z of where we need what would be the biggest impact for any given region and all those projects laid out. And because right now, a lot of projects, and I see it at FAMPO, there's a lot of politics played in it. There's a lot of, well, it'd be better if we did this. It'd look good for my constituents, as opposed to, you know, adults getting in a room and making a decision on what is the priority and laid out across the state, and then regional. Hey, these are the projects that are determined to be the most important projects in your region. You as a MPO need to determine to prioritize them or break them up into an area or try to get your jurisdiction to pay for them. I haven't seen that in the year on GWRC and a year on FAMPO. I haven't seen a strategic plan that laid out, hey, these are the projects within the MPO that we at VDOT and across the state think are the most important to relieve traffic on interstates and the state roads and the feeder roads. And I don't see that. And again, I think we've kind of, you know, of course everybody knows we've been fighting the toll road because as commuters, we don't see the purpose. You know, if I've got all the way across the Rappahannock River and I start exiting at the rest stop, well, I'm basically home. I think there's a lot better improvements, and I see, you know, $200 million worth of work here. I'd love to see us take the $300 million toll road project and spread it out and do all of these projects at one time, or even take the money and build the Jackson Gateway, which would be a whole lot more impact than a Greenway, toll road, I'm not sure we're calling it today. So the two questions, I mean, the one was, do we have any type of strategic overarching plan?
I think the best way to answer that is that the 6-year improvement program is made up of inputs from planning documents such as our VTrans plan, which is really focused on statewide priorities that affect cross regions.
Right.
They don't identify specific projects, but focus on high-level intermodal connectivity
Right.
corridors.
And I guess that's what I can look at. If I pulled a map of Virginia up right now and all the interstates, whether it's rail or air or road, would I be able to sit there and say, that's VDOT's #1 focus area for transportation? And we've already did an analysis, and we determined from each district that these are the, like this list of projects, these are the most important projects for that region, and they should be prioritized and or phased in a certain way that makes sense. But I don't know that I can go to a map and do that.
Not necessarily. There are a lot of inputs that go into the 6-year improvement program, and that document essentially is our prioritization and, you know, where
Yeah.
we have the money.
Yeah.
Some of its inputs, as you mentioned, for, you know, the FAMPO region, FAMPO comes up with the constrained long-range plan, which is really its way of prioritizing projects long-term.
Right, but they're all done somewhat independent. I guess there's no, what I'm looking for, where's the adult in the room that lays out and says, these are our overarching priorities? And each one of the MPOs, I think they're out doing their own thing. That's my question. Are they getting guidance from VDOT saying that these are the most important and most traffic, most effective ways to improve traffic flow? Or
ultimately, we we serve in an advisory capacity
Yeah.
to the various entities that feed into as inputs,
Yeah.
and ultimately we
So, and I understand.
we provide recommendation.
So I guess that would be one recommendation. I'd love to see VDOT take a stronger lead as the transportation experts in laying out the framework for the MPOs to build on. So of course, you know, we're always going to have problems with funding here. I noticed on the spreadsheet you had, and again, I think these are all great projects, and I'd love to move forward with them because I can see a significant amount of improvement to the traffic. And again, that's why we were trying to engage you guys directly, because we're not getting any success through FAMPO. But you've kind of laid out yellow and green, and yellow means you're in the process of working on those?
The whole way it's set up is that the schedule is laid out based on funding. So year 1 would be when we start receiving funding for those phases. Yellow would be PE and right-of-way, and the green would be the construction phase. And under each year, we've got some potential places where we would like to see funding to
Right.
be added to these projects to move them along.
So I look at, so you've kind of allocated where in year 2 where you're looking for local match across both 118 and 126, and where the state would put their match, assuming that this was an approved, we're going to do the whole thing, and this is where we'd allocate it. And then, but in year 4 and 5, do we no longer need local match, or does it fall off? Or, you know, when you go into a project, the assumption is that it's funded.
I think it's important to remember on the sheet that y'all are looking at that these are durations of projects, not assuming that they all start at the same time, and some of these parts can't go at the same time.
Right.
So that would be some prioritization that this board would ultimately need to consider.
Well, yeah, I mean, I kind of understand that, but
Sure.
You would recommend to me, here's what we think.
And
This one must go, then this one.
Our
then this
assumptions for
one.
year 2 and year 3 on this are based on the idea that we have 2 years left on the bond. So to make best use of the revenue sharing program and have 10 million
Right.
in Spotsylvania County funds paired with 10 million in VDOT funds, this is the recommendation of how we would distribute it over the next 2 years.
Yep.
Beyond that, we can't say for sure because the county would need to make, plans for future commitments.
And that's kind of where, if we spent between, I don't know, phase 3, where we've put 2.5 million local and 2.5 million state, year 4, I mean, I would hope that there's a funding stream to continue on.
Yes.
So where's that commitment come? Who makes the decision that, we're going to sign up for all of these projects, county's going to put up X number of dollars, 10 million a year or whatever it costs? Where's the commitment from the state or whoever, federal?
I think the first important step is to get these projects initially funded for design.
Yeah.
And once the county makes that commitment to, these projects would be included in the 6-year plan, they would have a better chance at receiving future funds. I can't say that there is a reciprocation that's definite right now, but, you can't get future funding unless you start somewhere.
Okay. Thanks.
Mr. Yakubowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you. I'm particularly interested in the 126 improvements. This is probably the 3rd iteration of improvements that are on the board ever since I was on here previous and then saw it in the paper and been living around here for so long that we just keep coming up with new ideas to fix the problem, and the problem just keeps getting worse. So I appreciate that this is looking, it seems to me, more long-term than just a Band-Aid fix, taking into account the growth that is projected into that area, that then will help, not only the current issues that we have, but the issues that we're going to have in the future. My question then, and I think Mr. McLaughlin kind of hit on it, was that we don't necessarily have to do these in order, because the 17 westbound onto the northbound 95 seems like that can kind of stand by itself.
Exactly.
So knowing that funding, even though the General Assembly passed a massive funding bill and we don't seem to be the recipients of a good portion of that, or if it is, it's not being given down to our county down here at the bottom of the totem pole. I'm wondering then, what would be if we only could do one, if we only had a very small amount of money, because the total project is at the high end 189 million and a half,
Yeah.
give or take a couple million, and then the shortfall is roughly 170 million. So basically, are you saying then we have about 19 million that is out there that we can grab quickly? And if so, because dollars in the future are dollars that don't exist, what would be the projects that we could jump on immediately that would have the greatest impact to getting traffic moving?
It looked to me it would be the phase 1 that we've tried, which would be the widening of 95 by 2-lane width. And the problem with that is that it would not be acceptable for revenue sharing. So if there was a private source that the county had to help fund those improvements along the interstate, that would go a long way.
Okay, then would the 17 to 95 northbound, would that wouldn't be acceptable for revenue sharing either, because that's interstate?
Exactly.
Okay, so of these items, revenue sharing would be acceptable for the super ramp?
A portion of the super ramp, yes.
Okay.
And I mean, we've got the ones where revenue sharing are, that we feel we have a good chance of getting revenue sharing, is where it's been allocated at.
Okay. And then to the point of the master plan, the idea of having these projects sort of work into what the overall idea of moving traffic, which is the whole point of this. As Mr. Trampy had said, that the Rappahannock Parkway dumps traffic onto Gordon Road. I don't want to create even more headaches by doing a project that will then dump traffic onto roads that are unable or unprepared to handle that, with no funding source for years to come to deal with those types of issues. So, but I do appreciate this, and I do like the long-term vision. Just hopefully we can find the money for it.
And I mean, as far as coming up with the priorities, we would be willing to sit with county staff to help direct as far as what we feel would be the best priority to help facilitate getting this project done. That's what we're here for.
Right. Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Barnes, I would recommend, without objection, that at our first meeting in February, between now and then, that county staff could get together with VDOT and come up with that priority list.
Understood. I had a question, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Sean, it's my understanding, because you pointed out some of the portions does not qualify for revenue sharing, and you've listed private funding also in the 6-year plan. In past, one of the things that we used to do in the MPO is when a locality identified a prioritized project and they put monies to it, that is, and I'm seeing head shaking, kind of a signal to VDOT is we need help with this, let's get this project done, and then VDOT actually goes out and seeks additional funding from the state to help us do that. Am I correct?
I think that's been a goal of ours. If the locality makes the commitment, we will do everything possible to try and augment that commitment.
So if this board prioritizes and we step up and we really, in terms of revenue sharing and putting in our portion of it and show the prioritization, get the project started, go back to Mr. McLaughlin's thing, not just design, but as this thing goes on down, there's a higher possibility that we can get some additional funding on the state level so that we minimize ours, and that's what we want to do. I just want to make sure that's clear, because in the past, that's what we've done. I've always understood it. It's us setting up prioritizing projects and then putting money toward it, making it, move ahead. Okay.
Are there any other questions?
I do, Mr. Chairman, please.
Yes, Mr. Skinner,
Thank
go
you,
ahead.
sir. Just want to look at some of the timelines that you've got here, and I think you've answered it. It's all based on funding.
Yeah.
So this timeline is flexible depending on what funding we come up with and stuff of that nature too, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, in the right-of-way, you're not necessarily looking to purchase the land itself, but the right-of-way to put the road through there, is that? Because I guess the question I have is, to purchase the land may be more expensive than just getting the right.
It would depend on which phase you're talking about, and that would all have to be done during the preliminary engineering portion of it to figure out if we're going to have to purchase land or if it's going to be within the existing right-of-way. And like I said, these are estimates that we've got from our planning people, and we discussed it with construction, our preliminary engineering, and we feel that we've got a fairly decent, good range of what these estimates would be for these projects.
I guess I'm just looking, and again, my biggest concern here is the length of time for your P&E and right-of-way, 5 years for the super ramp, and yet that land is fairly simple as far as who owns it, what we own it, and so that is my question there. I mean, I don't think...
Well, it's quite a bit of environmental concerns through there, too, where we'd have to go through a NEPA document and...
Yes, I understand the NEPA, been through it. Don't want to go through it again, to be honest with you. But I understand what you have to do there. Okay. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I've got a couple of questions. So let me clarify that the revenue sharing program is only guaranteed for 2 years in the future?
That was just based on the information provided by staff that we have 2 years left. Bonnie wants to add on to that.
Right. The last bond referendum that we had was in November 2005. We have a 10-year window of opportunity to issue those bonds after the referendum. That then expires in November 2015. So that means fiscal year 2016 is the last time that we can issue any bonds associated with that referendum.
Gotcha.
There's nothing that says that you all can't authorize another referendum in the future.
But as far as the state goes, that program's still going to continue?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Just on our end?
Yes,
sir.
Okay.
So
We can't make any distribution recommendations without knowing.
Sure.
right.
Now, go ahead.
I'm sorry. That's why we've looked at the CIP that will be coming to you in February, issuing $10 million in each of 2015 and 16 to apply to some of these projects. But that's why we stopped at 2 years.
Okay. And whether we do it through a bond referendum or some other means, if we're granted that revenue sharing for 1 year, but it's, say, like we have a phased project on both of these, are we guaranteed that the state will accept with limited funds of $150 million, let's say, that the state has in revenue sharing? Would we be guaranteed of getting that in the out years?
For each year, it's separate. It's up to the CTB. They have, obviously, the 15 to 200 million range is per the Code of Virginia of what their minimum and maximums are. Each year, that number is, can fluctuate up or down. Right now, the emphasis is funding priority one projects. They're not ranked or scored. If they qualify for priority one, they are or they aren't. In the last 2 years, as I said before, we've seen a little over $150 million statewide. All priority one projects received funding, and then priority two projects received a prorated amount of their request. So moving forward, there's no guarantee that more localities won't become participants, and we might start getting requests exceeding that $200 million. At that point, we might have to even start prorating priority one projects.
I have another question. How does a county like Caroline County that's not a member of FAMPO or a planning district, how do they make their priorities known to VDOT, and how does that get rolled into this process?
Well, I would remind that Caroline County is a part of the George Washington Regional Commission, so they do have their priorities from there.
But they're not a member of FAMPO at all?
Correct. They're not a part of the urbanized area. Their biggest focus is on their secondary 6-year plan, as well as submitting their priorities through elected officials, through our public hearings that we have annually. The PDC has a rural long-range plan that their priorities are listed in, that we analyze and see what we can, apply available funding towards.
Okay. And Sean, really quick, what's the cost of the Rappahannock Parkway portion of what's currently on FAMPO's #1 priority? Do you happen to know that?
I don't know it off the
$200 million?
top of my head. Stephen, would you happen to know, or Michelle?
Yeah. Another question, if you can follow up on that, but are the projects you briefed tonight, are they priority one? Would they be considered priority one projects?
The county would have to identify them in an approved locality plan. So your comprehensive plan or your capital improvements plan, you would have to identify a desired construction date, a realistic construction date, based on when the county thinks it could fund it. So it might be something that's way out there. And we need to show how these funds will advance the construction of the project.
Okay.
As long as they're eligible for the type of work and they can demonstrate that they would be moving construction sooner, that would be classified as a priority one project.
And I think as far as with helping with the revenue sharing, Jason and I will work very closely with the county to make sure the applications are in such of a nature where they would get strong, favorable consideration.
Okay. And I'm just going to mention this. Mr. McLaughlin mentioned it. I've been a member of FAMPO for the past 2 years, GWRC for the past 2 years, and I can say there is no plan, even internally among the 3 counties or 3 municipalities that are involved, to tie things in together. I don't know if that's something we could do in our legislative agenda, is say, we would like VDOT to take more of a role in tying these together, because quite frankly, we have no idea what Orange, I know they're in a different planning district. I know there's a CTB member that represents Orange, but we have absolutely no tie-in with them at all. And it's quite possible that you could do a project for both counties or both municipalities that would be better than the #1 priority from just one. But I have not seen, I don't think there is such a thing as the state tying in a strategic plan to get the most bang for the buck. Okay. Along that bang for the buck idea, how do we give you guys new ideas? How do we, I know in other words, like, let's say that we want to consider some roundabouts on Harrison and maybe an on-off ramp on Harrison I-95. How do we start that process to look at, sure, Sean? Because I love your visionary, you said you're a visionary. I love the ideas you have. I love the roundabouts you've got down at 118. Side question, is that speed limit around the roundabouts, will that be about 35 miles per hour? Will they be that big to handle that? Or?
I'm not sure what the speed limits will be. We'll have to go through the design with that. Maybe Stephen could touch on what would the speed limit
I was just wondering, because a roundabout at Spotsylvania County Mall is probably different. It's going to be a lot smaller than these. So people might around here might think that's the roundabout, but they're going to be.
Yeah, we will put roundabouts in that can accommodate the type of traffic that we expect for that situation.
So I do know other board members have some ideas locally. I think we have that infrastructure already set up at Harrison all the way out to Route 3. How do we initiate that process without FAMPO, with VDOT, for you guys to just say, hey, can you look at this? Is it feasible? Or does it have to go through FAMPO?
You can approach us with any type of recommendation that you would like.
Okay. And then was there a cost on the Rappahannock Parkway portion?
It was $284 million.
And that's only the parkway.
But that was not the total recommendation that was made at the CTB meeting.
Right. But, so for the public that can't hear, it's 284 million just for the Parkway portion, which is mostly 95% through Spotsylvania County. But that's tied to other improvements that are off of Route 17 up by exit 133, correct?
Yes.
Yep. So we could really use that 284 down here for other purposes, I think, but I don't think that's a battle for us to fight. Are there any other questions? Mr. Skinner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question. Again, there's no funding. What we know is the Jackson Gateway, and this is what we've been basically discussing today. There's no funding out there right now because of priorities that have been set by CTP and everything else. Is that correct? I think you said that, Mr. Robinson.
Currently, there are no projects identified in the 6-year plan associated with that area. To get funding, we would have to go through several processes. Working with the MPO, adding it to the constrained long-range plan.
And something else I saw in the brief that you gave us, we're currently good up through 2019, right? So if we were to identify a project that we wanted to go through the MPO or something, it would start in 2020, correct?
Yes, sir,
Unless we ourselves step up and try to find some funding that we can revenue share with you and private ownership, stuff of that. That's the way that we're going to have to look forward to at least through 2019. Is that not correct?
I would also point out that at any time you can submit an out-of-cycle request to try and get initial funding through FAMPO. It's just that the policy board would have to agree to prioritize such projects ahead of existing projects that do have funding in the 6-year plan.
Okay.
But FY 2020 is the next year that we'll be looking to prioritize projects for out-year funding through FAMPO.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions from the board? Getting close to our public. Thank you so much, VDOT. Thank you, county staff. Appreciate it. If we were going to go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, one other item. I just wanted to say that we have inundated y'all with a lot of information, not only with the presentation, but the information that was included in your packet. And I want to apologize for rushing through some of it. I think it's a wonderful idea to come back and present again on the other items, the priority items. And I wanted to say that this PowerPoint presentation is posted at www.spotsylvania.va.us under Capital Projects. And it's also posted under the Utilities and Public Works website as well. So it's there for everyone to view. And we have a great deal of reference material that you can come back to.
And Mr. Barnes, if it's possible to put those 2 links on our landing page for the county, I think it'd be worth it because this is a great brief, a lot of detail. Thank you very much.
Yeah, be glad to.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And then again, we'll meet at the first meeting in February to go through those projects.
We'll come back and we'll talk about prioritization of some of these projects and how we want to move forward.
All right, I'm showing 4:25 right now for public presentations. Amy, has anybody signed up to speak?
Yes, sir. Robert Morrison.
Sir, you have 3 minutes. The lights will turn red, yellow, or green, red, and yellow. Please state your name and address.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If there is no objection, I would like to request that he be given 5 minutes for his presentation.
Are there any objections? 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Bob, if you just state your name and address and you have.
Welcome, Chris. Welcome back. Yes, the name is Robert Morrison. Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to address this board. I come before you today as a concerned Spotsylvania citizen. My concern is that the county is no longer competitive with public safety pay and benefits. Over the years, county officials, along with us, the citizens, have become comfortable in our way of living. We expect everything that has been there will be there in our time of need. I'm referring to the county employees in general, and specifically the county first responders, fire rescue, and deputies. Let's review some of the issues and impact. Spotsylvania continues to grow. Single-family homes are being constructed. Townhouses, apartments, office, schools, and hospitals have added to the county's growth. This growth only adds to the population and traffic. The county has done little, if anything, to support the needs of the employees who are directly impacted by this growth. We expect that the public safety officials will be here regardless of this growth. We continue to increase their responsibilities and provide little incentive to stay with Spotsylvania.